Welcome to Inside Marketing with Market Surge, your front row seat to the boldest ideas and smartest strategies in the marketing game. Your host is Reed Hansen, Chief Growth Officer at Market Surge.
Hello and welcome back to Inside Marketing with Market Surge. Today I'm joined by Kevin Hubschmann, the founder of Laugh.Events, a company that's reinventing how we experience live and virtual events by putting comedy and creativity at the center. With Laugh.Events, Kevin has turned laughter into a serious business tool, helping organizations build connection, boost engagement, and create memorable shared experiences, whether in person or online. Kevin's work has been featured in outlets like Authority Magazine, where he shared his insights on running successful live and virtual events. And he's really become a go-to voice on how humor can transform workplace culture and team dynamics. We're going to dive into the entrepreneurial journey, the lessons he's learned about building community through comedy, and why laughter might be one of the most underrated growth strategies in business. So Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Reed. Excited to be here.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, like I mentioned before we started recording, I'm a big fan of comedy and I guess a comedy appreciator. And so I think what you're doing is really cool. But what inspired you to start Laugh.Events and, what's the scope of the business?
Yeah. Well, my origin story kind of starts right when I moved to New York City. My brother, when I moved there, he had been in the comedy scene previously and had taken a bit of a hiatus. And he was like, "You're coming to New York, you're living on my couch, and we're going to do improv comedy." And I was like, "That's perfect because I don't have a job right now." And so I was working at this company called Splash, and they couldn't pay me either. So it was, I had a lot of freedom to kind of do, go and work at a company and learn how a startup was being built while also doing improv comedy. Eventually, I built out my role there at Splash, and I became, first a utility player, and then eventually became the first salesperson that eventually grew to about 20 plus a sales department by the time I left. But while I was in my early part of my career, I was doing stand-up comedy for 3-4 hours a week improv comedy for 3-4 hours a week. And we were, I was just learning, I was learning a lot. When you do improv, it's less about being funny and it's learning how to work with other people and communicate effectively with people and find your moments where you can, input something that's going to bring the scene closer to, where it should be by the end of it. Not necessarily a laugh. The laughter kind of comes naturally when you follow the rules and work with people. And it was just very fun to see what kind of structure that was giving me. And I would go into work the next day after doing improv all night, and I felt like everything moved a little bit slower. And I felt like I had a leg up on everybody because I kind of was able to stop myself from interrupting folks or able to listen more effectively on a client discovery call. I was just really seeing all of these different skill sets that I was learning in improv were really translating perfectly into the workplace. And so, I continued to grow my career there at Splash, and, things were going well. Unfortunately, the band broke up, so to speak, of our improv group, and I got into stand-up comedy now. And that was a new lesson that I was able to learn. And I was able to, I was already pitching all the time as a sales person, but now I got to actually work on writing jokes, understanding timing, understanding all the detail that goes into, the economy of words. There's all these things that I was learning that I was able to go the next day and say, okay, I can apply this at work. And I started to see so many synergies between comedy and my life as an enterprise salesperson. And so I just kind of let those worlds merge until eventually I brought a comedy show to my office. They had an awesome stage and lighting, and one of my friends was an amazing musician, and he joined me, and we just had an amazing time bringing the best comedians in New York City into our office to throw the show. First, it was a lot of people from my office, and then eventually it was just people that heard about the show. And it turned into really one of the best shows in New York City at that time. I used to say, this is the best show in New York City on a Wednesday. at 7 p.m. I got very specific. And, that was the origin story. And then I eventually moved away from Splash and I started Laugh.Events, which focused on kind of bringing corporate comedy to folks, which was during the pandemic where people were really, obviously in a really need for laughter and, a good opportunity to do something unique and bond with their team. And then as everyone got back in person, we started focusing more on what I started my career with, which was improv and facilitating these workshops that allowed people to connect with each other and effectively communicate in the workplace. And, we call that laughing in development. And so now that's a really strong pillar of our business.
So, this is super interesting. And what it raises in my mind is kind of like the dichotomy. I feel like, if anything, comedy by its nature is kind of anti-corporate, where corporate is like the epitome of seriousness,
Yeah.
stodginess. And then comedy, I mean, from so much comedy taking its source from the corporate life or, corporate figures to just the, I don't know, the serious you have to come to a meeting or a sales pitch with. It's how do you reconcile the two? Because you've got a foot in both worlds now, and it's almost like you're trying to bring a little less seriousness into the corporate world. Tell me about your mindset there, because you've obviously done extensive work in both.
Yeah, I honestly only say the word corporate comedy experiences because that's like an SEO term.
Sure.
If it wasn't for that, I'd ban the word internally because it's a word that already gets people stiff. And so, that's also why we don't call our our improv experience improv. Improv is a scary word for a lot of people because they think, whose line is it anyways? And, they have to be funny, where it's like, no, we call it laughing in development because that's what it's about. You're going to laugh with your team, you're going to grow with your team. And on the comedy side of things, it really turns into like, how do we work with folks that are interested in just kind of letting the air out of the room a little bit? And so I think at first it starts with kind of positioning to the group. A lot of people also say corporate comedy are they corporate appropriate, right?
Mm.
And that's another important thing. A lot of people think comedy clubs, corporate comedy, those worlds don't kind of exist. But what you learn is that every comedian not only has their set that they do in the comedy clubs, but they have to have a set that's available for like network television.
Mm.
They have to have this ability to be very clean for the FCC. And if it's good enough for the FCC, it's probably good enough for your company. But what we do to help mitigate that is we're really big on data, right? I come from a world of the corporate world and the enterprise sales world. So as much data as I can use to inform the decisions of a product is really what I go for. So no matter what the event is, we do a intake form from the event organizer themselves to understand, like, we already have a baseline of like, we're going to build ourselves as the best comedy experiences for your company that you can have. That's the brand that we're focused on. But on top of that, tell me what other things that you're scared of or things that you don't want to be heard. And so it's a mix between putting your foot down, kind of saying, we don't like to call it corporate comedy. We'll call it corporate comedy if it's helpful for you, but we do comedy for companies, and we're not going to hurt you, and this isn't going to go badly, basically. And so the survey really helps people put all of their fears down, checking every box that could scare them. Basically, it always goes well. Maybe those first few shows when we started, I had to learn a lot, and those weren't as smooth. But we've done 600 plus shows, so including with the improv virtual and in person. So all these different types of events. And so those reps really help you to understand, how do we not just market this effectively, but then how do we work with the clients to understand, like, hey, we got your back. Like, we want you to work with us again. We're not going to like just do this event, grab the money and run.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's great. So let's talk maybe a little bit about some of the logistics. Like, an organization contacts you. You've mentioned the intake form, which I think is pretty valuable because I'm sure there's some unique cultural points for each organization, things they want to emphasize or de-emphasize. But what does it look like from there? And like, what's the on-site experience like?
Yeah. So, first off, comedy is really important when it comes to the setting of what you're doing. And you know what I always also something that we learned was in the beginning, they'd be like, send us 5, 6 comics and we'll look. And I felt, okay, I'm the expert. And so I thought that that was a very important turning point for us where we basically said, we know exactly what these comedians are going to say. We've worked with them a lot. We have a lot of reps. We do the pre-event and then we do the post-event. And so we're combining like how well did we do in picking the comedian for the show. So when you have a data point of not just 500 shows, but these are all of the attendees that we're sending this stuff out to after the event. So we have thousands of data points to say, did we make the right decision? So I think at first it was, kind of stepping in and saying, we've got your back. We are the authority, and we're not going to let you looking at a few comedy clips for 5 minutes dictate if this event is going to go well. That sounds very risky in my opinion. So kind of taking back that control. The second thing happens to do with like, is your setting going to be appropriate for a comedy show? Are you going to have people walking around? Are people going to be eating while this is going down? Like, are there lights anywhere? Do we have a microphone? Like, there's all of these different components to ensuring that an event goes well. And that really has to do with like, how do we ensure the environment is excellent? And so that's kind of the two part in ensuring that it goes well. And that's another reason why we lean so hard on. So we have the virtual comedy events, which are amazing. We literally do the best ones around. We've perfected it. Then we have the in-person comedy experiences, which really dictate like, hey, how good is the setting to ensure this is going to, we have great comedians. They're going to do their job really well. Are you going to be a great partner and have seating, lighting, microphones? Are you going to invest in that? We have like great vendors to help with that too. But then the third thing that really unlocked it was when we started leaning hard into the laughing and development side of things, these applied improv, because that didn't need all of those components. We didn't need microphones, seating, lighting, everyone's like sitting down like they're in a third grade classroom watching a show. We actually got to incorporate everybody in it, and all we needed was an empty space. And we just needed people to be able to move around. And no one was performing, but they were actually doing, these different games and exercises, and they were letting down all their vulnerabilities, and they were allowing themselves to connect with their teammates, or if the CTO is in the room, and also like a first-year intern was in the room. But when you're doing applied improv with each other, everyone's on equal footing. So it turned into this really cool opportunity to like also be on the same page as everybody, and you're creating this really cool supportive environment where the comedy shows, they're fantastic, they're so fun, but with the laughing and development events that we've pioneered, those events allow people like I did the next day after work to feel more connected with people, to communicate more effectively. And that's really where we found that people are going to laugh like crazy. And so my goal turned into just like, how do we optimize for laughter? Because the laughter is crazy when you start to look at the biology data when it comes to laughter, right? It increases endorphins, it lowers cortisol. When you're doing it with other people, you're getting a hit of serotonin, so you're bonding with them more effectively. So as long as you can create an environment to have that laughter surging, the event's going to go awesome.
Yeah, well, that is really cool. Now, I've seen similar activities. I haven't been like pulled on stage to do actual improv, but obviously it's a ton of fun, very, very engaging. And I know that the bonding, like you're talking about the endorphins and the serotonin gets released and it's really effective. But do you have like leave behind activities to help them continue to foster this improv spirit, or be able to build and share off of this?
Absolutely. Every time we do these, again, I'll focus on when it comes to, virtual comedy shows and in-person comedy shows. Not really. They're having a good time. They're just trying to enjoy themselves. It's usually part of a celebration. Now, when it comes to laughing and development or applied improv workshops and classes, these are a series of exercises and games. And, we start off by doing very fun and quick warm-up exercises that you're able to do to kind of get your mind going and get that comfortability in a good place so that you can keep taking more chances as the exercises go on. Because like you had mentioned, like brought up on stage, we never want people to feel like they are performing or need to be like, hey, this is like, I need to be funny in front of people. So all of our classes and workshops are created so that folks will really kind of start dipping their toe and then their ankle and then their knee, and then suddenly they're underwater with everyone doing synchronized swimming and they're having a good time. So I like to say those first few warm-ups that we do can be applied right into your next morning meeting, right? You can go around and do these events. My favorite one to do that everyone and your listeners can also do this with their teams, it's called one word at a time story. And it's when everyone goes around and everybody has to say one word and it has to complete a story. You know, the name the name gives away
Sure.
the description. So you go around and you do it, and the first time everyone does this, when they get hit on like a boring word like or and or but or a, like something that's really just kind of connecting the bigger fun words, they always go for like a bigger thing like elephant or like something that's like wild, and it's funny. It gets that quick laugh, but you learn that it kind of shatters the story. And you say, let's do this again, and let's do it and be really conscious of wanting to complete the story together. And you do that, and you start to take turns with people getting the fun big words and some people taking the smaller words. And it's kind of a great metaphor for a team. You know, not everyone is going to get the credit, but if it was not for you helping me connect that word with another, then we weren't going to be able to get to our final goal. So, you know, it's exercises like that that are not crazy complicated, that you kind of understand how it goes, and you can have your team kind of start that to do a meeting, get people on the same page, and it's those events in the beginning where everyone's kind of warming each other up and getting people comfortable that are applicable. And then, you know, the other more complicated stuff, we always recommend a facilitator because it is sillier and funnier and less likely for people to do when they're crowded around a conference table.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. So I want to zoom out a little bit and talk about Laugh.Events as a business and you as the founder. What have you found to be most effective in marketing your services and getting new clients? You know, anything that we can learn from?
I know.
Yeah.
And then that's like, you know, I think like I have my biggest takeaway that I have learned over the last 6 years is never stop experimenting. And I think that there have been times where I've brought on consultants of stuff that like I'm not the best expert in, and I would listen to them say like, "Oh, don't even try that," and I didn't. And then you know when I actually went and tried, let's just use one example. You know, I started my newsletter recently over the last 6 months. And that was something one of my consultants was like, I've tried it, don't do it, waste of time. But it was my ability to kind of connect with people on a non commercial level and allow them to kind of me do a lot of founder led marketing where I'm telling them more about, but also it turned into like a diary entry for me too. And I got to really spread my knowledge. So, you know, I'm also getting a lot out of it. But what I really found was like, once I even started, you know, doing that more, I felt like I was becoming a lot more of a thought leader in the space, but I was also connecting with people that weren't necessarily going to buy my product, but it has resulted since in people recommending our product to other people and forwarding that email along. And it's something that was really easy, just like getting it out every week. And if you miss a week, big deal, just do it the next week. People don't notice. These emails always come through, and they're reading it as they're, you know, cleaning everything out anyways. So like, you know, I've done that with advertising. I've done that with email marketing. I've done that with search engine optimization, you know, especially with the stuff with ChatGPT and the large language models. You just have to keep experimenting and trying new things. And I think that that's the biggest advice that I would give to anybody is your job as a marketer, your job as a go-to-market individual is that you never can stop experimenting, because you never know what's going to be under a rock, or what one product might work in one medium versus your product in another medium. So, what might work for Google ads might be better for LinkedIn ads. What might work for LinkedIn ads might not work for LinkedIn ads, might work for Facebook ads. So you kind of have to keep finding your audience. And, I love this phrase that people are saying. It's not search engine optimization, it's search everywhere optimization. Where are people searching for you? How high is their intent? And you just can never stop experimenting.
Yeah, well, that's great. Well, a couple last questions to wrap up. Is it harder to become a stand-up comedian? Is that a harder skill to attain, or to start a business?
They're honestly the same thing. And I think that was one of my biggest learnings, was that all stand-up comics are their own business. They need to find all of the different sales channels and revenue channels that they have. They might do live tickets or live shows, so they're doing ticketing. That's one of their revenue. They might be doing podcasting. They'll get ad revenue from that, or Patreon subscribers. They might be selling merch. That's more revenue. So all comedians need to find, obviously going and performing, that's your product.
Yeah.
That's just like you're in the R&D and you're in the product side of things. And you're constantly crafting that. And obviously, like, not everyone can do it. It's super hard. It takes a lot of work, but more importantly, it takes like a lot of failure. But doesn't that sound just like a small business owner, someone that's starting their business? Like, it's constant failure. And so you're both developing a product that you can't give up trying and experimenting and doing new things and tweaking it and failing constantly, and just having that shell, hardening that and getting those scars so that you can reference them later. But then it's, all right, now how are we going to make money once we've nailed this product? And how are we finding our audience? And so, whether it's you're creating a product, in comedy, it's creating a set where you're finding revenue. In comedy, in other businesses, it might be recurring revenue or other types of one-off revenue. And then, the third thing being like, who is your audience, and are you listening to them to give them what they want so they'll buy more from you and get stickier? So, I'd say that they're both very hard, but they're also just very, very similar.
Interesting. Well, I love that. You've been such a great guest. Like I said, I'm a fan. I follow a lot of comedians on social media, and just love it. And Kevin, I would love to promote Laugh.Events. Where can people find you if they'd like to work with you?
Well, LinkedIn's obviously a great place to find us. And obviously our website, Laugh.Events, is great. Our newsletter is also great. It's laughrx.laugh.events. So those are kind of the three best places to find us. Whether you want to work with us or just hear me talking more about this stuff and nerding out about the comedy world and how it relates to being a business professional, that's what you can see on LinkedIn on my newsletter.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kevin.
Thank you, Reed. Have a good one.
Want to stay ahead of what's actually working in marketing right now? Head over to marketsurge.io and see how we're helping businesses grow smarter, faster, and louder. That's marketsurge.io, because your next breakthrough shouldn't be a guess.